Welcome to Naptime Sports Talk Podcast. We are two dads talking sports during nap times. Thank you for tuning in to the latest episode. Welcome back to Naptime Sports Talk Podcast. For episode 7, we'll start out with latest news on the Minnesota Wild, Minnesota Timberwolves, and Minnesota Twins. We'll then each share our top 5 tight end prospects for the NFL draft. Then we'll dive into an NFL free agency preview. Enjoy the show. So, Zach, is there anything you'd like to state before we get started here?
No, not really. Obviously, free agency starts tomorrow. The tampering period starts, so a lot of crazy news is going to be flying out, and it's going to be a lot of exciting times ahead for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So, I'll just get started with the Minnesota Wild here. So,
sounds good.
As of right now, the Minnesota Wild are 6 points back of the second wild card spot. So still outside the playoff picture as we speak right now. The Wild did extend Zach Bogason this past week. He earned a 2-year deal with an AAV of $1.25 million per year. You know, he is a pretty gritty defensive D-man, so it was nice to keep him on the Wild going forward. And then this past Friday, March 8th, the trade deadline happened, and the Wild were very active at the deadline. They made a total of 4 trades. The first trade actually occurred on Thursday, March 7th. The Wild traded Brandon Duhaime to the Colorado Avalanche and acquired a 2026 third-round draft pick. So then on Friday, they ended up trading Patrick Maroon, a.k.a. Big Rig, to the Boston Bruins for a 2026 conditional 6th-round pick, and then a left wing prospect named Luke Torbokowski. He is currently 22 years young and will turn 23 in April. He has spent the past 2 seasons playing in the AHL for the Providence Bruins. During his 2-year pro career, he's played in a total of 96 games, has 22 goals and 24 assists for a total of 46 points. So definitely a guy that needs some more further development, and we'll see if he can maybe make his way into the Wild lineup in the future. The next trade, the Wild sent Nick Patan to the New York Rangers for another winger named Luke Ellison. This trade was nothing too major for the Wild. That Ellison is actually 31 years old, so I think they're just trying to, trade pieces there. Patan, same thing. He's kind of older too. I think he's played a little bit of games for the Wild this year, but hasn't played many. I think it's like under 10 or something like that. And then the last trade of the day, right before the deadline ended, they got this right in just in the nick of time. The Wild traded Connor Dewar to the Toronto Maple Leafs for a 2026 4th-round pick and a prospect from Russia named Dmitry Ovchinnikov.
Nice.
And Ovchinnikov is a forward prospect who primarily plays a center position. He's 21 years old, turns 22 here in August. He was a 5th-round pick back in the 2020 draft. He's been playing in the AHL for the Toronto Marlies this season. He has played in 20 games with a total of 10 points, 7 goals, and 3 assists. So we'll see if any of these guys turn out for the Wild in the future. I think Ovchinnikov is definitely one of the more exciting prospects. A lot of guys out of Russia during this last 3 years, they've kind of slid in the draft a little bit because teams aren't sure if they can get him over here in the United States, because generally those guys go and play in the KHL for a few years to develop. And, look how long it took the Wild to get Kaprizov over here. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think that kind of deters some players or some teams from drafting those players a little higher up. So he's definitely a guy that kind of slid during that year. And then in other exciting news, the Wild big prospect, Marat Huznedovanov, I finally figured out how to pronounce his name thanks to Billy G at a press conference. He is now in Minnesota. Cool. He was just in Wild gear, I think, this morning skating. So we're just really highly anticipating his debut. They play today at 2:30 as we're recording. It's Sunday. I don't think he'll play tonight because he hasn't had a practice with the team yet, but I think maybe on Tuesday, I believe they play next, we could see him out there. So I'm really excited about that.
Nice, that's awesome. And the Wild actually made a lot more moves than maybe people were anticipating at the deadline, so that's pretty sweet too.
Yeah, for sure. And I spoke on Duhaime and Dewar as guys that they could potentially trade, but they kind of surprised me a little bit with how active they were. And it's Duhaime and Dewar were solid players for us. So, I wish them the best. I'm excited to see what they can do on their future teams. So we just had to make those moves to, both those guys. I think Duhaime is going to be a pending free agent this year, and then Dewar is going to be, I believe, a restricted free agent, but still he was going to be looking to get paid some, and we just don't have that type of cap right
Sure,
now.
that's awesome. And with the team that's outside looking in when it comes to the playoffs, it's nice when they're pretty active at the deadline to switch it up a little bit. So that's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll see what happens. So yeah, moving on to the Minnesota Timberwolves. What is any news surrounding the Timberwolves the past week or
Yeah,
so?
so unfortunately, like I was saying, the biggest thing for the Wolves is, they got to stay healthy. And unfortunately, Karl Anthony Towns is going to be out for the foreseeable future. He has a meniscus tear. They said that he will be having surgery on it and he will be reevaluated in, 3 to 4 weeks to see, how he's progressing with his rehab. A guy like Joel Embiid has the same injury and they're anticipating him to be back for the playoffs. So hopefully it'll be a
Okay.
lot of the same for Towns. Hopefully he can, rehab will go well and he'll be back for the playoffs. But if I had to guess, the Wolves will not have Karl Anthony Towns for the rest of the regular season, so that's a huge loss. But what's nice about that is obviously we talked about Nas Reed quite a bit, and he's a really special player. So it's going to be nice to see what he can do with starting minutes now. So he's just going to slide right into Towns' place and be that new starting guy. So that'll be kind of exciting to see. But speaking on this past week, Monday night they beat the Blazers. Rudy Gobert had a big game. He had 25 points and 16 boards. And then on Thursday, they played the Pacers, and that was the game where Ant had that crazy fourth quarter. Um, he ended up having that crazy block at the end of the game to seal the deal. That was a spectacular game to watch, and he
Yeah.
finished the game with 44 points. Like, I don't want to, obviously you hate comparisons, especially when they're this bold, but I mean, he honestly looked like Michael Jordan in that fourth quarter, the way he just absolutely took that game over. So that was really cool to see, and
Yeah.
that was a really nice win. And then on Friday, they lost to the Cavs in overtime, and you and I were talking about it. Those refs were absolutely terrible. They were so bad. So I felt honestly like the Wolves really didn't have a fair shake in that game. And Ant really did not have a good fourth quarter and he didn't score at all in the overtime period. So that was kind of tough to see. But now this upcoming week, just looking ahead a little bit, they play the Lakers tonight, and then they play the Clippers on Tuesday and the Jazz on Saturday, all away games. So we'll see what they can do. But just real quick, looking at the Western Conference standings, the Wolves are in the 2 seed. They're a half a game back from the Thunder. So hopefully they can just keep like we said before. Hopefully they can just keep the pedal on the floor and just make that late push. But with Towns being out, it's definitely going to be a lot harder. So we'll see what they can do. But we need guys like Ant and Nas Reed. And it'd be nice to see a guy like Jaden McDaniels, step up offensively to kind of help with their offensive struggles as of late. So we'll see what they can do. But this upcoming week's going to be huge when it comes to the Western Conference standings.
Yeah, definitely. And things I just noticed this season is when those other guys go cold, Towns usually steps up offensively and keeps the team kind of their head above the water
Yep,
there.
exactly.
So that's a big loss, and hopefully he'll be back for the playoffs. So yeah, I just want to go back real quick to that Pacers game. Man, it had that ending where Edwards blocked that shot. That was
Unbelievable.
just absolutely insane. Then he hit his head on the rim
Yeah,
too.
I mean, talk about
Just
athleticism. He literally hit his head on the rim when he went to block that shot.
yeah, that
Like, I
is
mean, he's
crazy.
such just an absolute freak. So, yeah, that game was so much fun to watch.
For sure. He's must-watch TV
Yeah,
right now.
he
That's for
honestly
sure.
is. The Timberwolves have been looking for their franchise guy. A lot of people thought they had it with Towns, but I mean, Ant is just a completely different level when it comes to excitement and stuff. So having a guy like that on the Timberwolves right now, I mean, this is if you haven't watched a lot of Timberwolves basketball before, this is definitely the year to tune in because they got a great team and they're actually really exciting to watch. So
Definitely, definitely. Well, yeah, moving on to the Twins now. So, just it's spring training right now still, so there's not a whole total lot of news, but 18 days away until opening day. They open the season on March 28th at the Kansas City Royals, and then they'll have their home opener on April 4th versus the Cleveland Guardians. I did a little research from our last pod or episode and how we talked about Royce Lewis and how many grand
Oh
slams he's
yeah,
had.
yeah.
So I went back and looked, and he's actually had 5 grand slams and 13 opportunities during the regular
That's
season. So
absolutely insane. That's
yeah, it's
crazy.
yeah, it's just slightly under
Talk about
50%,
being
but
clutch.
yeah, that's pretty impressive. So I agree. I agree. Moving on to our next topic now. So we'll just go quickly and just share our top 5 tight end rankings for the draft. So we can just alternate. We'll go 1, 1, 2, 2, so
Yeah.
on. So I'll just get started. So my number one tight end, he's clear cut above everyone else. I think the only first round pick in this draft, and that's Brock Bowers out of Georgia.
Yeah, absolutely. He's by far my number one guy. Um, Now just speaking on this tight end class, just overall, it's definitely a down year. This is honestly probably one of the worst tight end drafts that we've seen in a while. Especially like looking at last year, we had guys like Sam Laporta, Dalton Kincaid, Michael Mayer, Darnell Washington was a second round pick, and Luke
Yeah.
Musgrove to the Packers. So, but just be going back and speaking
Yep.
on Brock Bowers, even in that stacked class last year, Brock Bowers still would have been the number one tight end in last year's draft. So he's definitely a special player. I anticipate him being a top 15 pick, and he's a guy that he can block, he can line up all over the field. So he's definitely a fantastic tight end prospect. And like you've said before, I anticipate him being, a top 10 tight end in the NFL, before too long. So definitely by far number one tight end in this upcoming draft class.
My second guy is Jatavion Sanders out of Texas. So, pretty athletic. Tight end kind of fits that mold. I don't know. I haven't seen him a lot go inline and block. I'm sure he has, but he's a pretty athletic dude, and you get the ball in his hands, and he's had a lot of tight end screens this past year. I remember watching. He usually can break a good 30, 40, 50 yards, sometimes even going all the way for a touchdown.
Yeah, and he's my number two also. He 6'4", 245. I think he ran a 4.6 or 4.70 40-yard dash. So he's got plenty of speed. Um but yeah, I think these guys this next, tier down from
Yep.
Brock Bowers, these guys are going to be probably day 3 selections if I had to guess. So definitely a big drop off there, but Sanders is definitely my tight end too in this draft.
My third tight end is Theo Johnson out of Penn State, and he didn't have a lot of, I think, opportunity last year at Penn State. He's definitely a guy, if you look at his stats, it's not going to blow you out of the water at all. But I really like his measurables. He's 6'6", 259. He has a 10-yard split of a 155. You're on a 4.57 40, and his vert was a 39 and a half or 39 and a half inches, and his broad was 10 feet 5 inches. So he's definitely a guy I'm very intrigued with that could maybe develop into something. I think that his athleticism could, it could help him really foster here in the NFL. So I think if he gets a chance with some team, that we could see him become a starting tight end here.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. He's in my top 5 too. But just real quick, my number 3 is Jaheim Bell, tight end out of Florida State. He had 500 yards last
Okay.
year. He's just a guy that if you get the ball in his hands, just let him work. He's usually makes the first guy miss, and he's a really good yak guy. So
Mm-hmm.
yards after catch. So I like him a lot. That's another guy that didn't have too many opportunities at Florida State to like really excel in that offense. So I think he's going to be a gem, definitely a day 3 pick. And he's a guy that you're going to line up outside. You're not going to line him up off the tackle. He's kind of a liability in the run game.
Mm-hmm.
So more of definitely a pass catching tight end, but a guy that I think in today's NFL could really excel. So yeah, my number 3, Jaheim Bell, tight end, Florida State.
All right. Well, my number 4 guy is Cade Stover out of Ohio State. So, yeah, I thought he's been a pretty solid tight end for Ohio State over the past few seasons. I've been very consistent, and I just look for him to be a pretty solid guy in the NFL too. We'll see if he can kind of develop into a everyday starter.
Yeah, I liked him too. He was actually just out of my top 5, but I do like him as a player. I think he'll be a
Okay.
nice pick too because he can block too. He's not just a pass catching kind of tight end.
Yeah.
He's definitely aggressive when it comes to the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
So my number 4 is Theo Johnson. You kind of just talked on him. I really like his size. You said at 6'6", 260, that 4.57 40, definitely athletic enough to play at the next level. He had 6 touchdowns last year in a really, you know, not a tight end friendly offense at all. So he definitely has the potential to potentially be a tight end number 1 on a lot of these teams in the NFL. So a guy that I like and a name to keep an eye on, but I definitely like him.
So moving on to my 5th tight end, that's Ben Sinnott out of Kansas State. Just another guy I think, that could maybe develop into a potential start in the NFL. But like I said, I'm not super high on all, this whole tight end class, but he definitely makes my top 5 list.
Yeah, and my number 5 here is Beverin Spanford, tight end out of Minnesota. Like you said, a lot of these guys are kind of just, pick your poison. This tight end class is not very good, but I like his potential. He's 6'7", 270 pounds. He is already 24 years old, but just a guy, he can block a little bit, catch a little bit. So a guy, maybe, 6th, 7th round that would be a nice pick for a team and just kind of let him sit and develop. And, maybe potentially he's an everyday tight end. So, I definitely like his potential at the next level.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. So, all right. Well, that kind of wraps up our top 5 tight ends. My number 1 guy was Brock Bowers. My second guy was Jatavion Sanders. My third guy is Theo Johnson. My 4th guy is Cade Stover. And my 5th guy has been Ben Sinnott.
Yeah, good list. My number 1, Brock Bowers. 2, Jatavion Sanders. 3, Jaheim Bell. 4, Theo Johnson. And 5, Beverin Spanford out of Minnesota.
I'm excited to see what that Spanford can do here at the next level.
Yeah, me too. It'd be cool if
he's definitely got the size.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. It'd be cool if the Vikings took him, super late, it's 7th round or something along those lines, just to see him in a Vikings jersey.
Yeah, for sure. On the St. Cloud too.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that would be it's a kind of hometown guy. So moving into our next topic, our final topic of our podcast, and that is an NFL free agency preview. I'll start off, Zach, by just going over the top 50 guys off of Greg Rosenthal's list off of the NFL Network.
Perfect.
So number 1, as of now, is Kirk Cousins. Number 2 is Christian Wilkins, defensive tackle. Number 3 is Danielle Hunter, edge rusher. Number 4, Tyron Smith, offensive tackle. Number 5, Saquon Barkley, running back. Number 6, Jonathan Greenard, edge rusher. Number 7 is Calvin Ridley, wide receiver. Number 8 is Mike Onwenu, offensive guard. Number 9 is Leonard Williams, defensive end. Number 10 is Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, safety. Number 11 is Bryce Huff, edge rusher. Number 12, Kendall Fuller, cornerback. Number 13, Xavier McKinney, safety. Number 14, Marquise Brown, wide receiver. Number 15, Stephon Gilmore, cornerback. Number 16, Frankie Louvu, linebacker. Number 17, offensive guard, Robert Hunt. He was on your list, wasn't he?
He was. Yep, he's one of the guys I would hope the Raiders go after.
Number 18, this guy's on your list too, Patrick Queen, linebacker.
Yep.
Number 19, Lloyd Cushenberry, center. Number 20, Jacoby Brissett. That's kind of surprising to me, quarterback.
Yeah, that's high, I think.
He's ranked before Baker Mayfield, and that's the next guy at 21.
That's really interesting. Weird.
So number 22, I'm really excited to see this guy out on free agency and see where he ends up. Hopefully he comes to the Vikings. Derrick Henry, I'd love to see him in purple, man.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that he's going to be on a new team next year.
Yeah, no doubt. Number 23, Gabe Davis, wide receiver. Number 24, Chase Young, edge rusher. He was on my list for the Vikings in previous episode.
Yep.
Number 5, Zadarius Smith is back in the free agency class here, edge rusher. Number 26, Josh Jacobs, running back. We'll talk about him a little more later.
Yep.
Number 27, Jordan Brooks, linebacker. Number 28, Andrew Van Ginkel, edge rusher. Number 29, Levante David, linebacker. Number 30, Cameron Curl, safety. Number 31, Jadeveon Clowney, edge rusher. Seems like he just continues getting these one-year deals every single year.
Yeah, for sure. And I think last year with the Ravens, I think he played the best year of his career. So really interesting to see what kind of contract he gets.
Yeah, definitely. Number 32 is John Simpson, offensive guard. Number 33, a Las Vegas Raider here, Andre James, center. We'll talk about him as well.
Yep.
Number 34, this actually just broke. This is actually breaking news today, and that is Fletcher Cox. He actually retired today.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know that, to be honest. I didn't hear that yet.
Yeah, so defensive tackle out of Philadelphia, Fletcher Cox, has spent his whole career with the Eagles, and he is now in retirement. So that's going to shift this a little bit. So actually number 34 moved to Josh Uche, edge rusher. And then number 35 would be Julian Blackman, safety. Number 36, Aziz Al-Shari, he's a linebacker. Number 37 would be Justin Simmons, safety. Number 38, Kenny Moore, cornerback. Number 39 would be Curtis Samuel, wide receiver. I'm excited to see where he ends up. He would be a solid guy to add to a team.
Yeah, he's a nice slot receiver. He's good. He's very good.
Yeah, for sure. That would be an intriguing guy to maybe he'll make my list here for the Vikings. We'll see. But moving on. So number 40 is Grover Stewart, defensive tackle. Number 41 is Tony Pollard, running back.
Yep.
I'm surprised that he's kind of out there too. That's another interesting one.
Yeah, this running back class is insane.
For sure. Number 43 or 42 is Trent Brown, offense tackle. Number 43 is DJ Reader, defensive tackle. Number 44 is Dorrance Armstrong, edge rusher. Number 45, Jonah Williams, offensive tackle. Man, I was really high on him when he was in that draft. When he came out, he was one of the guys that I was hoping the Vikes would maybe go after.
Yep.
But then I think he just kind of, I think he went before we picked. But that's an intriguing guy out there in free agency.
Yeah, good offensive lineman. I think he's still only 26 years old too.
Yeah. Yep, 26 is on here, so pretty young.
Nice.
So another Raider here is up next, and that's Jermaine. He might have to help me with his last name.
Illuminor. Yep, exactly.
Okay,
nice.
Illuminor.
Nice. Yep.
So offensive tackle, previously from the Las Vegas Raiders. Number 47 is Mitch Morse, offensive center. 48 is Chidobe Awuzie, cornerback.
Yep, Cincinnati.
And then number 49 is Danico Autry, and number 50 is Calais Campbell, defensive end. And Autry, go back, he's a defensive tackle. So a lot of defensive line guys in this free agency class in that top 50. Some solid running backs, some solid offensive linemen. But, man, yeah, like I just said, that offense, there's a lot of defensive linemen out here for teams. So this is a good free agent class to need that D-line help.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you just said, Calais Campbell's the 50th best guy. You know, he's a little older, obviously. I think he's 37 or 38, but, you know, going back and watching Falcons games this past season, he was their best defensive lineman. So, I mean, you're going to get a lot of studs in this free agency class. It's a really, really nice class.
Well, yeah, so I think we're going to just do a little experiment next, and we're going to go over our free agents for our team. So I'm going to ask Zach here. I'm going to go over some free agents that he sent me for the Raiders. This is not going to be all the free agents on their list. And then he's going to go over the Minnesota Vikings with me. So, yeah, well, let's get started here. So, Zach, number one guy I have, not number one guy, but the number one player on this list that I have listed is Andre James, and he was a starting center this past year. So do you think Andre James is going to be back in a Raider uniform next year, or do you think he's going to be going off to another team?
I think Andre James will be on a different team next season. We had a guy in Dylan Parham that started at guard. He's a younger player, excelled really, really well at guard. They kind of slid him in, and it sounds like he will be the new starting center going forward. So Andre James should be on another team next season.
Okay. So next guy is Amik Robertson, cornerback.
Yeah, and this is I really like this player. He's small in stature, but he's one of those guys we call dogs. He's definitely a dog. Um, I just don't. I think the way the defense is playing out, I think we're gonna go probably cornerback either in the first or second round of this upcoming draft. So I think Amik
Mhm.
Robertson will not re-sign with the Las Vegas Raiders.
Okay. And he's not just a dog, he's an absolute dog.
Absolute dog, he is.
So next guy is Greg Van Roten. Is that how you say his last name?
Yeah,
Or
yep.
is it Van Ruten?
It's Van Roten. Yep,
Van Roten. Okay,
yep.
thank you. So starting offensive guard. Is he going to be back next year?
I think that he will be on a 1-year deal. He came in and played really well. He's older. I believe he's 33 or 34. So I think a 1-year deal would be good. They can't lose all these guys on the offensive linemen. So I think that he will be back on a 1-year deal.
Okay. Next guy, Bilal Nichols,
Yep. Yep.
defensive tackle.
Yep. And I don't think that he will be back. I think our entire defensive tackle room is going to be completely different next year. Obviously Tyree Wilson played a lot of D tack, so I think he's going to be playing that, going forward. So I think Bilal Nichols will not be on the Raiders next season.
Okay. I'm moving to the next guy, Brandon Bolden, running back.
Yep, and I think he'll be on a different team next year also. He was a guy that played with Josh McDaniels in New England. Now that Josh McDaniels is gone, I think Bolden will also be gone.
Next player, Brandon Parker, right tackle.
Yeah, this is a guy that he's always been, a guy coming off the bench. With injuries, he comes in and usually struggles. I do not see him coming back next season.
Okay. Austin Hooper, tight end.
A guy that really kind of underperformed this year. We really didn't use our tight ends as much as I thought we were going to, especially with Josh McDaniels being our head coach for half the season.
Yeah.
I know Josh McDaniels is pretty high in him, but with the new regime, I do not think Austin Hooper will be back.
Okay. Yeah, hopefully Michael Mayer can have a
Kind of a breakout year.
I hope so. Yeah, he was my favorite tight end coming out of Notre Dame, or the last year's class coming out of Notre Dame. So I'm excited to see what he can do this year for you guys.
Absolutely, me too.
So here we go, Jermaine Illuminora, guy we just talked about being in that top 50 free agent class. Do you think he's gonna be back on the Raiders?
So this is a guy I hope that we re-sign. He came in, played right tackle for us. He's also played a little guard too, but he played right tackle majority of last season for us. Played very, very well. But I think if I had to predict, I think teams are going to be on him pretty heavy once the tampering period starts. I would love to see him back, but if I had to guess, I think that he will be on a different team next season.
Okay. And then the last player on this list I left for last, and that's Josh Jacobs, running back.
Yeah, see, this one makes me nervous. This is a guy that I really want back next year. Obviously, Antonio Pierce, he wants to run the ball. We got a guy in Zamir White who really played well at the end of the year when Josh Jacobs got hurt. But Josh Jacobs going back, a lot, not last year, he was battling with injuries, but the year before, he led the NFL in rushing yards. He looked like the best running back in the league. So I would hate to see a guy like that go. I'm pretty sure he's still 25 years old. So if you could get him on a 3-year extension, that would be huge. But with the tampering period starting tomorrow morning, this makes me a little nervous that teams like the Bears, the Eagles, the Giants, a team like that might be willing to pay him a little more than the Raiders would. So we'll see what happens. But if I had to guess, I think that he will be back. I think he wants to stay in Vegas. I think the Raiders want him back. I think teams will offer him more money going elsewhere, but hopefully he takes a little hometown discount and stays with us. So I will say Josh Jacobs will be back in the silver and black next season.
Yeah, for sure. And no state income tax down there in Nevada, too.
Exactly, which helps a lot. That's huge when it comes to free agency for sure.
Definitely.
So we'll switch over to the Vikings here. Now the Vikings have some pretty big name free agents coming up here. So yeah, I got a list here. We'll just get right to it. So first guy on the list here is DJ Wanham. Do you think that he'll be back next season?
Oh, man. I would like to see him come back just to see if he can continue to build off of last year.
Sure.
I think the Vikes are going to try to get him to come back. Yeah, I really do. So if I had to predict right now, I think, he's going to be back.
Nice. That'd be a huge re-sign because he played really, really well opposite of Daniil Hunter last year.
Yeah, definitely.
Another guy that I have on my list here is Jordan Hicks. Do you think he'll be back?
Unfortunately, no, I don't think Jordan Hicks is going to be back. It'd be nice to have him back because he's a really good leader in the locker room,
Sure.
and I think he can just be a very good role model for some of those younger linebackers like Pace, Asamoah. So if I had to guess, I think the Vikes will go out there and maybe try to sign someone in free agency for a little cheaper,
Okay.
and then just make a little starting competition between Asamoah and that player to see if one of them will take over that second position. I think not Troy Dye, but I think Ivan Pace Jr. will
Yes.
be linebacker one next season.
Nice. I love that. Another guy on this list that I really like, and I hope that the Vikings re-sign, Dalton Reisner. Do you think he'll be back?
I would absolutely love to have Dalton Reisner. We were hot on him coming out of training camp last year. Unfortunately, it took a little while to get him actually signed and in the building. Just listening to his end of the year press conference, obviously all his players say they want to come back. I full-heartedly think he does. He seems like a pretty honest guy and just a good person. So I would love having him back at that left guard position. But we'll see what happens. Maybe he'll have a chance to get more money on the open market.
Sure. And I feel like as soon as they plugged him in at left guard, that offensive line kind of went to an entirely different level. So I like him a
Yeah,
lot.
definitely. One thing I would have to say, he's a pretty solid pass blocker,
Hmm.
but I would like for him to maybe become a little better at
A little more dominant.
run,
Yeah, for sure.
the run game. So,
For sure.
we'll see. We'll see what direction the Vikings go if they bring him back, and maybe he can, having a full off season with them would help too.
Yeah, no doubt. Next guy on the list, KJ Osborne, wide receiver.
I was expecting big things out of KJ Osborne this season, and he kind of disappointed. Just a lot of drops, maybe missed opportunity. I think he really missed his opportunity this season. If he had a really solid year, he probably would have hit open market here and maybe could have had a big payday. He still could.
Yeah,
I don't know if the Vikings are going to bring him back. He's another guy though that seems like a pretty good locker room guy, so it might be hard to let him go.
yeah.
Um, but if I had to predict right now that no, he won't be back.
Yeah, I thought on a contract year that he was really going to ball out, especially, with Justin Jefferson missing a handful of games. I thought he was going to step in that role and kind of take over, and he really never did. So kind of
Yeah,
surprising there for sure.
for sure. Yeah, I agree.
Next guy on the list, Jonathan Bullard.
So Jonathan Bullard, he was he played a lot of reps last year at the inner defensive line position,
Yep.
defensive tackle. He's pretty solid, but he's not a guy that we want as a starter. He's more the depth player.
Sure.
So, I think we could probably bring him back for pretty cheap. I'm gonna predict that he comes back on a cheaper end deal.
Okay, nice, nice. Next guy on the list, Cam Akers.
So yeah, the Vikes went out last season and traded for Cam Akers during the middle of the season. He came in and you could just see from the get-go, he was the best running back in the running back room over Alexander Madison too. And then, then he unfortunately had an Achilles injury after the Green Bay game, after Lambeau Field, after Kirk tore his Achilles the very next game, Akers tore his. So, he's had, I don't know, I think that's his third Achilles injury now in his young career.
That's crazy,
But,
yeah.
they went out there, they traded for him, the interest was there. And I don't think you'd get a lot of money on the open market.
Sure,
So I
yeah.
think this is a guy that maybe the Vikes could say, hey, why don't you stay here in Minnesota, continue your rehab, and we'll give you maybe another 1-year deal, kind of prove it thing, and then maybe he has a chance to earn a little bigger contract after next year. So yeah, I think Akers is going to be back.
Nice. I really hope that they bring him back. At least compete with maybe a rookie running back or something along those lines. But I do like Cam Akers a lot.
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to be ready for training camp and maybe the
Right.
start of the season. So
Right.
he's a
Yep.
guy that they could get back and maybe put on the pup list for a while. Then when that time frame is up, put him right into the running back rotation.
Yeah, no doubt. Next guy, Brandon Powell, receiver.
Yeah, so Brandon Powell, I liked him a lot last year.
Yeah, it
I
was fun
thought
to
he
watch.
made most. Yeah, I thought he made most of his opportunities. Obviously, as we talked before, we just can't have him doing the tush push on fourth and third down
No,
there.
definitely not. No way.
So, especially when you have guys like CJ Ham, you have guys like Josh Oliver that can go in there and maybe a lot bigger than he is. So
Exactly. And doing it
I
two
like
times in
him
a
a
row,
lot,
that's insane.
right? I know. hopefully KLC learned from that one. But I like that one though. I like Brandon Powell as a wide receiver. I like him as a good depth guy. He came in and he made most of his opportunities that he spoke before. So I think they're going to try to re-sign him. I would imagine that he'd be, another guy with maybe 1 to 2 to 3 million range too for him in that range to bring him back. So I would definitely bring him back for another season. Just add that depth to the wide receiver position.
Yeah, and another thing nice about him is he's pretty valuable in the return game too. So he can.
Yeah,
it's nice to have a guy like that on your team.
yeah, definitely.
Next guy on the list, Marcus Davenport.
So Davenport has that void coming up here. I think it's 6.5 million, somewhere in that ballpark. So if we don't sign him before the new league year on Wednesday, then that officially hits the books.
Sure.
And we just lose that money against our cap. So, man, if I was him though, I'm not bringing him back because he gave him that money last year, and he couldn't stay healthy. I don't know how many games he played. It was maybe like 3 or 4 games. Could be misspeaking on that, but it wasn't a majority of the games. He played a very minimal amount of games.
Yeah.
He did make a difference though when he played, but if they could maybe get him back, to come back at $3 million, something like that, I would probably be interested. But I don't know if you can rely on him. Like you can use that money to maybe get another guy that could maybe stay healthy.
Yeah, that's one guy that's never played an entire full season. He's always had injury concerns, even going back to his days for the Saints. So I think last year he ended up with like 2 sacks or 2.5 sacks or something, and they gave him 13 mil or something, 1 year, $13 million deal. So definitely he did not perform up to that contract. So
no,
I'm
gonna say he's not gonna be back.
Yeah, I like that. Next guy,
I think they just take the hit on. I think they take the hit on that and just move on.
Yeah, I think you're right. I really do. Next guy on the list is Troy Dye.
Troy Dye is a good special teams guy this past season, came in too and made some plays when Hicks was out. Man, he's another guy that maybe they could have him come back on a cheap deal. So potentially, but as of right now, I'm going to say no.
Okay. Another guy on my list here, Chris Reed.
Yeah, so Chris Reed, I believe he is from Minnesota. I don't know I think he might be the guy who played at Mankato. I could be misspeaking on that.
But
he's
I think you're
right. He's just a solid depth guy to have in the locker room, or just even on the team, the offensive line room.
Sure.
And he has a lot of experience, and I think that adds, value to that position.
Yeah.
So I think he's going to be back. I think the Vikings value him back as that guy that can come in and play games. He doesn't need to play a full season, but when called upon, he can go in there and help and not have a too major of a difference from the starters.
Yeah, exactly. And he's a nice depth piece, and he's been there since KLC's been the head coach, I'm pretty sure. So definitely a guy that knows the system and could be a good depth piece. But now I saved the 2 biggest guys for last. So I'm going to start with Danielle Hunter.
The closer we get to free agency, I just don't think he's coming back. Yeah. I don't think he is. I think he's gone. He's going to now we look at it because we go back and that top 50 changed quite a bit because there are some guys that received franchise tags. I think this would be a perfect spot to talk about that real quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, like Brian Burns, who else was there?
Let's see if the franchise tag, L'Jarius Sneed. Yeah, he got the tag. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be a tag and trade. Antoine Winfield Jr. got the tag.
Yep.
I think that's another guy that'll resign. Yeah, you said Brian Burns. There was more.
Josh Allen, that's what I was thinking of.
Yes.
Josh Allen. He was in the top 5 there on this list, and then, that changed based on the franchise tag. So Hunter is definitely the number 1 edge rusher on this board now. So I think he's going to be a hot commodity in free agency here. Teams will value his consistency. I think his medicals will be fine. And yeah, just the closer we get there, I think he's going to be gone.
Yeah.
I really do.
I think
it's
so
unfortunate
too.
Because he's been one of my favorite Viking players for a very long time, and I'm a little bummed out about that. But
Yeah,
we'll see.
for
We'll
sure.
see what happens.
And when he's healthy, I mean, you could argue that he's one of, if not the best pass rusher in the NFL. I mean, how many sacks did
Yep.
he have this year? 16 and a half or something crazy like that.
Yep.
So he's also really good against the run. I kind of look at a guy like Montez Sweat that got an extension when he got traded to the Bears, 4 year, 98 mil. I think Daniel's probably going to get a little more than that. I definitely expect him to sign a $100 million contract when it's all said and done. And man, that's a lot of money. But losing a guy like that is definitely huge for the Vikings.
For sure. If I had to predict right now, too, this is just my prediction. What I'm going to say. I'm not going to say dollar amount, but I know at the end of the year he went down into Texas and watched the Houston Texans playoff game there. I have a
Dude,
feeling that he might end up in Houston with D'Amico Ryans.
that's crazy. And I know they have the cap. I know that was a team that was kind of on the watch out for Mike Evans. Now that Mike Evans is back with Tampa, they're going to have that extra money. And
Mm-hmm.
God, could you imagine having Hunter next to or on the opposite side of Will Anderson?
Yeah,
Man,
that
that'd
would
be
be
nasty.
I would be excited to see him down there if he's going to go to a team. At least it's that the Texans instead of some like the Bears or the Lions or the Packers. I would just be sick if that happened.
Oh, I would too. Yeah, I wouldn't want to see that either. Like having him play opposite of Montez Sweat in Chicago. Houston would be a perfect fit. I know, players love playing for D'Amico Ryan, so I could definitely see that. That's a really good prediction.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
And then last but not least, quarterback Kirk Cousins. What's going on with him?
Man. So my gut punch or my gut reaction right now, just you hearing little things here over the weekend on Twitter, on Instagram, through different sources around the NFL. Athletic came out this morning and they said that through one of their sources, I wasn't sure who the source was, but that Cousins is going to let the Vikings know tonight
Okay.
of his decision with if he's going to go test the market and see what's out there or if they're going to get this deal done.
Yeah.
At this time right now, I think it's the later that he's going to go out there and test the waters because, man, if they do get him signed by the tampering period, it's like some zero dark 30 stuff, man,
Yeah,
because
for
they
sure.
have been very quiet. And that has, we know that they're in negotiations, but it hasn't sounded like has been even close to getting a deal done. So,
Yeah,
going
for
back
sure.
to what KOC said at the scouting combine, he did mention him testing waters in that void year, or that void is coming up. That starts on Wednesday as soon as the new league year starts. So there is an opportunity, that he could test waters, not officially by going visiting these teams, but he can talk to teams in those 2 days.
Yep.
So like before in previous episode, I was kind of thinking, well, it wouldn't make sense because, well, if he's going to test waters, well, he goes out Wednesday and that void happens. But now if you go back to it, he actually has a couple days just to chat with teams legally,
Sure.
as I quote here, legally,
Yeah.
because it's probably been happening for a while now. But yeah, if I had to predict, I think I'm going to stick to my guns and he's going to the Atlanta Falcons. That's
Yeah.
what I've been saying from the beginning.
Yep.
It just makes the most sense. I think they're more ready to win right now. And we'll see what happens. But if I had to predict, yeah, I think he's going to Atlanta. I really do.
Yeah, and I want to give you your props on that because you've been saying that since pretty much the season ended that Atlanta is a good landing spot for him. Before, you see all this stuff on Twitter and all these guys are kind of hitting and hawing that, he might be going to Atlanta. Like you are definitely on the ball with that. So definitely giving your props with that. But when it comes to Cousins, man, it's just insane how well he played this season. I mean,
I
in
know.
my opinion, he was playing the best ball of his entire career. He looked like
Yep.
he with this MVP year or just in the NFL in general, this year, the MVP obviously was Lamar Jackson, but his play was not that spectacular, in my opinion. So now,
Yeah.
if Kirk Cousins doesn't get hurt, he only played 8 games, but he threw for over 2,000 yards, 18 touchdowns, and 5 picks. Like, if he keeps
Yep.
that up, I mean, you're looking at the MVP of the entire league. And now that he's a free agent quarterback, I'm really curious to see what happens. Um, I'm totally on board with your prediction to the Atlanta Falcons. I just think that makes the most sense with that division
Mhm.
not being that strong. They got a ton of weapons down there. I just think that team is ready to win on, both sides of the ball. So I think that's a perfect fit for him. I could definitely see it. It's just, it's weird to think that the Vikings are going to have a new quarterback next season. I just think that's what's going to happen. And it's going to be weird to see, but I'm excited to see what happens. But I agree with you. I think Kirk Cousins is gone.
Yeah. And, saying that too, it's hard because you're right. Like, it's not like he was not playing good ball.
Yeah,
He was playing his probably best ball or best football with the Vikings here this season. And then
yeah,
we were just we were really hitting our stride too, and then he has to get hurt, which was a huge bummer.
terrible.
But I wouldn't be surprised if something with the Vikes gets done.
Yeah,
I'm not seeing it, I'm not going to be surprised if it's not going to happen. Like, I'm not going to acknowledge that that's a possibility because I do think they want him back,
yep,
but they have a dollar amount as being reported that they want him back for. Like, Kirk, we want you to sign for this. And, he's talked about taking a hometown discount in his end of the season press conference, and he's saying how he's looking more for the structure of the contracts. I don't know if that means more guaranteed money or if it means years.
yep.
But we'll know here pretty soon what's going to happen because we should know, I would imagine, before Wednesday coming up.
Yeah, I would think so too. And in another thing that I've been seeing, and take this with a grain of salt because it is Twitter again, but the Vikings were not willing to give him a fully guaranteed contract. That was a
Mm-hmm.
big turnoff for Kirk Cousins. That's what he definitely wants, going into free agency.
Yep.
And Albert Breer, he works for Sports Illustrated, or he did.
Okay.
He claims that Kirk Cousins could get a 2-year, $100 million contract, fully guaranteed, so 50 mil per season.
Damn, that'd be nuts.
So
I just don't see that happening. Like, I don't think he's gonna get 50 million.
I don't
Because
know. That's
even
so
this
much money.
weekend broke too that Atlanta might have a ball or a top cap that they're willing to pay him too. So maybe, like, hey, maybe it's like pretty similar to the Vikings. He's like, hey, I want to stay here in Minnesota. I know the organization. I know the offense. We're clicking after last year. I love KOC. I don't want to move my kids down to Atlanta to a new school. They
Exactly.
can obviously find a different school down there, like, no problem. But
Yeah.
it is a lot. It is kind of a headache to move your family across country. I know he does have his wife is from the Atlanta area.
Yep.
His dad, what I found out, lives down in Orlando, so that would be a little closer too.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm just, there's a strong possibility too that he could be here in Minnesota. But I'm just going to predict right now that he's going to be in Atlanta.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the
So
thing that's crazy is, we've been talking about Kirk Cousins for forever, and we're gonna find out here, as soon as either tonight or tomorrow. I think we find out for sure by Wednesday. So within the next, 2, 3 days, we're gonna see where Kirk Cousins ends up. So it's gonna be nice that this will all be figured out very soon.
definitely, definitely. Well, yeah, moving on to our last section here of NFL free agency, we're now going to talk about, just three guys that we would like for our teams just to go out there and look at. And I'm not going to go a lot of depth on these guys.
Yep, same here.
Some of these guys I've mentioned in previous episodes too. But just to start off, Zach, last night, big news broke that I know kind of tugged at your heartstring a little bit, and that's Chris Jones re-signed with the Kansas City Chiefs for 5 years, $160 million. 95 million guaranteed.
Yeah, that's just ridiculous. I kind of figured that's what was going to happen. I mean, you can't let a guy like Chris Jones go. Obviously, the Chiefs are a little strapped for cash with Mahomes' big contract, but I just think this is it's a home run for him. It really is. I was hoping a guy like that was going to hit free agency market. Obviously, he would be the number one player in free agency if he actually did hit. Well, he's not hitting anymore. He's going to be in Kansas City for probably the rest of his career, and that's a big time bummer for me because he would have been on my list if he was available.
Yeah, no doubt. I know you've been talking about him for a long time this whole offseason.
Yeah,
So,
I love that player.
and just before we start, too, in other news today, Mac Jones was traded to the Jacksonville Jaguars for a late round pick. I don't know. I think it was like 6th round. I'm not sure what year it was, if it was this year or next year.
Yeah,
But that very interesting trade there for Jacksonville. Maybe they're just thinking they can get a guy in here, because Trevor Lawrence had some injury problems last year. Get a good backup in, develop him a little more too, and then maybe he ends up being like a trade guy or a trade candidate in the future. The thing is, though, Mac Jones, I think next year is his 4th year, and then after that, he's going to be a free agent. So
yeah, and I think you hit it right on the head. I think that's they traded for him. They'll probably let him develop a little bit, and then in a year or two, probably look to trade him because obviously, he's not ever going to compete with Trevor Lawrence, but a guy
No.
that, Trevor Lawrence, like you said, does have injury concerns from time to time, and a guy that can step in and, maybe play a little bit, but I think he's definitely a trade candidate going forward.
He had a really solid rookie season, Mac Jones, and just kind of fell apart. So I don't know if the Patriots developed him the best. So maybe he can find a way here at the Jacksonville Jaguars and maybe become a eventual journeyman starter or something like that.
Yeah, and another thing on Mac Jones, I mean, let's be honest, the Patriots never built a team around him. They always
Yeah.
had a below average offensive line. I mean, majority of the people can't even name a receiver right now that's on the Patriots. Who's their number one running back? They never really put talent around Mac Jones. So I think a
Yeah.
lot of teams are looking at that too. And now the Jaguars have weapons, so we'll see what he can do on the preseason and stuff. But yeah, I think the Patriots really kind of screwed Mac Jones over, to be honest.
No, yeah, no doubt. And I'm kind of nervous whoever ends up there, if they do go the quarterback route now in the draft here at number 3, whoever goes there, man, they might have a tough up, or tough God, I was trying to think of the word, just
It's a tough go. It's a lot of the same as
yeah,
Mac Jones. I mean, there's just nothing there. That's a team.
right?
I mean, the Patriots have money, so now they
Yeah.
could go out and get a guy like Kelvin Ridley. They just need a number one receiver. So if they do
Yeah.
take a guy like Drake May or something at 3, I mean, you better hope that you sign a big name free agent because Drake May is going to need some weapons, or it's going to look a lot of the same. In a couple years, we're just going to say that Drake May was just Mac Jones 2.0. So
Yeah. Just send them up the field kind of really.
absolutely for sure.
So, all right. Well, who are your 3 players that you'd like the Raiders to go out in there and just, see if you can get them come into down to Las Vegas?
Yeah, so I think these 3 guys are definitely realistic. I think they fill definitely big time needs that we have. Now, I kind of talked about it before, but Hunter Renfrow and Jimmy G will be getting cut soon. They'll save around 25 mil with those 2 cuts. So when it's all said and done, the Raiders will have around $70 million. So they can go out and afford these guys. Well, number one guy on my list now that Chris Jones is gone, Christian Wilkins. I'm really surprised that he didn't get the take from the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah.
Fantastic player, absolute beast in the run game and as a pass rusher. I would love to see him play next to Max Crosby on that defensive line. Um, Obviously letting guys like Bilal Nichols go. Yesterday we cut Tillery, another defensive tackle on the Raiders. So a defensive tackle is a massive need for us, and you can go out there and get a top 3 player in this entire free agency class in Christian Wilkins. So I really hope that happens. He had 9 sacks last year, still only 28 years old, and last year he actually had the highest pass rush win rate in the entire NFL at defensive tackle. So he's definitely an absolute dog. So love to have him.
Yeah. An
Uh,
absolute dog. He is actually my number 1 guy too. I talked about him in a previous episode too, where we actually talked about our top 5 favorite free agents for this class that we'd like our teams, and he still remains number 1 for me, Christian Wilkins. So, man, I hope that if he's not going to the Raiders, he comes over to the Vikings and goes right back into that Flores scheme that he's familiar with.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, whoever gets him is getting a freaking beast. So, yeah, he's
An
definitely my
absolute
number one.
dog.
Absolute dog. So, number 2 on my list is Devin White. Now, going back to the 2019 draft, I think it was, the Raiders ended up taking Cleveland Farrell at 4. I really wanted us to take Devin White at 4. Devin White went 5th overall to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Remember that?
His his first 3 seasons, he was an all-pro type of linebacker. He's still only 26 years old. And, he actually got benched a decent amount last year, which was kind of surprising. He just didn't really fit in with what they were doing on defense. But last year, if you look at his stats, he only played 13 games. He had almost 100 tackles, 2.5 sacks, and 2 interceptions. So
Yeah.
he's still a beast. I would love to see him next to Robert Spillane. And, obviously I like Patrick Queen a lot. I've talked about him. Devin White's going to be a lot cheaper option. And another thing that's kind
Yeah.
of go ahead.
That just surprises me too. Like, I just think Devin White, in my opinion, is just a whole nother level than Patrick Queen.
Yeah, I mean, and especially his first couple years in Tampa Bay. I mean, honestly, Devin White looked like he would be one of the better linebackers in the entire NFL. And he played opposite of Levante David. So Devin White wasn't even like their number one linebacker, and he was still going out there and putting up insane stats. I think one year he had 9 sacks as a linebacker, which is insane. And another little tie-in here, the Raiders, their new linebacker coach is Mike Caldwell. And actually, Mike Caldwell was the linebacker coach during Devin White's first 3 seasons in Tampa, where
Okay,
Devin White had played his best ball. So there's definitely a little connection there. So hopefully that's a guy that they can get done.
yeah, definitely. So my number 2 guy is Andrew Van Ginkel. I'm just going to be sticking to that Miami defense here. I think this Van Ginkel is a very underrated pass rusher off the edge, and he would come right in and he'll have that familiarity with the Flores scheme, and I think he would just be a big difference maker right from the get-go. And if you lose Hunter, I think Van Ginkel can kind of pick up a little bit of that pace. I'm not saying that he's on the same echelon of Hunter, but he can definitely make a huge difference in our defense.
Yeah, and he had the best year of his career last year. I think he had 6 or 7 sacks last season. So when you lose a guy like, they could possibly lose DJ Wanham, lose Daniil Hunter, a guy like that could step in and play very well for you. So that's a nice pick.
Who's your third guy?
So number 3, Micah Becton, excuse me, right
Yep.
tackle from the New York Jets. He was a high pick. He was 11th pick in the 2020 draft. He's still only 24 years old. Tons and tons of injury concerns, which is the reason why he's a free agent this year. He he played more snaps this past season than he did in his first 3 years combined. So this past
Yeah.
season, he was actually healthy. He actually played very well. He was good in obviously pass protection and, really good against the run. He's 6'7", 370 pounds. Now, just right off the top of my head, I think he's the biggest guy in the entire NFL. I know Trent Brown might be a little bigger. I think Trent Brown is
I
6'8".
think, what about Falalele?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Because he's 6'9" or 6'10", isn't he?
He's a mammoth. Yeah, I'll look him up. You keep going here.
Yeah, but he's 6'7", 370 pounds. And last year for the Jets, he played left tackle and right tackle, so he can play on both bookends. So that's really nice too. And with a guy like Illuminor hitting free agency, I think if you could go out and get a guy like Becton that could play right tackle opposite of Colton Miller. And another thing that's nice about Becton is he's going to be a pretty cheap option. I think that it would be like a 1-year prove-it deal, especially with all his injury concerns. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I would like him a lot. Give him like a 1-year, $7 million contract. I feel like that would be enough to get it done, and just let him eat opposite of Colton Miller.
Yeah, that'd be a really nice signing. Yeah, so looking at Falalele here, former Gopher, dude, he had to put on some weight since the last time I've looked, but he's 6'8", 380 pounds
Yeah,
right now.
that's freaking huge. Yeah, so Becton's 6'7", 370. So yeah, he is definitely bigger, dude. What an absolute mammoth of a human.
My number 3 guy is Curtis Samuel, wide receiver. So just kind of intrigued with him. He's a very kind of gadget type wide receiver, like very athletic. I think he's pretty underrated.
Yeah.
And he would just be another good guy to add up, or another great wide receiver to add to the mix of Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. And if we lose KJ Osborne, he could easily slip right in there to be a wide receiver 3. And he's really most likely like a wide receiver 2. So you're getting really high value on that. So I'd love to see Curtis Samuel in a Vikings jersey.
That'd be really cool. And a guy that can stretch the field. I think his combine, he ran a 4.31 or something insane like that. So he's insanely fast. Back to back 60-yard reception season. So a guy that can definitely produce. And like you said, if you got JJ on one side, Addison on the other, Curtis is going to see a lot of one-on-ones in that slot. So he would definitely be eaten.
Definitely. So yeah, just go over a list real quick. 3 guys that I mentioned: Christian Wilkins, Andrew Van Ginkel, and Curtis Samuel.
Yep, mine is Christian Wilkins, Devin White, and Micah Becton.
Awesome. Well, we will see if our guy or our teams here go out there and sign these guys, and we will be having another episode here probably this week, free agency week, after everything starts happening. Might have to have some emergency podcasts when things do move, and if they do move quickly. So Zach, do you have anything just to wrap up our show here?
No, I don't think so. I think all I really have to say is the next time you guys hear from us, all these guys, all these question marks will probably be answered. So this next podcast coming up, there's going to be a lot of news to dive into. So it's going to be exciting, and I can't wait to see where all these guys go.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, everyone, for listening and continuing to support our podcast. We've really enjoyed this and are, a little overwhelmed with the amount of listeners we've had. So it's been really cool that other people are enjoying this too. And if you are enjoying our show, give us a little shout out to other friends that you think that would enjoy this podcast too.
Yeah, definitely. Love you guys. Go Raiders.
Skol Vikes. Thank you for listening to our episode. Be sure to give us a follow on Instagram and X at Naptime Sports Talk Podcast for content related to the pod. Thank you for the support.